Welcome to the UCF podcast. My name is Clark, and I've recently eaten a big bowl of spicy ramen and then a bowl of ice cream. So I apologize if I sound like I have tuberculosis this episode. I'm here with my
I,
co-host
on the other
Francis.
hand, do not have tuberculosis, and I haven't eaten a large bowl of spicy ramen just now. What I have done is watched the fights last Saturday, Carlos Prates versus Neil Magny. We're going to be going over those results. End of the episode, we'll give you a preview of next week's main event. But let's get into last week's main event. The Nightmare really did knock out Neil Magny. He face planted just about a real sneaky punch that caught Neil just on the top of the head behind the ear. Really, really tough to hit that on purpose. I don't know if he did. The borderline looked like a phantom punch until you look at it from all the different angles. But yeah, Magny has always had trouble with power punchers if you can't tie them up. He tried to tie Carlos up early, tried to get the takedowns going, could not get him down, could not stay on him. And anytime that they were at range on the feet, Prates just started to punish Magny. The low kicks even looked like they were just too much. And once he started to land on the feet there, it was over. This one didn't get out of the first round. And like I said, Magny just about fell face down. Hopefully I can time that well with the clip. You got any thoughts?
This one was just such like I don't know, like it had to happen. Magny has a number beside his name, Prates didn't. So like you kind of have to throw this one in, but God, this one could have just been skipped, you know? Prates just very dominant. Magny desperately trying for a takedown, understands he's not going to win on the feet, and it's very reasonable to try for a takedown. And so we get to watch Magny just kind of like hold on to Prates' legs a couple times. He has, I believe, how many? 7 attempted takedowns, and he did not get any of them. One thing that is maybe worth noting is that Prates actually drops Magny at one point and then just lets him get right back up. Prates knows he's not winning down there. That's not his game plan. He has no intention of getting down there. He's got good takedown defense, right? It isn't just because Magny can't throw a takedown. I mean, maybe he can't, but it's not just because of that. It's because Prates is making sure that he's staying up. And it was just really good, really excellent. But at the same time, I don't know. This one was such a, like you knew it was going to happen. I don't think anyone was shocked this didn't make it out of the first round. So I am interested to see what Prates does against stronger competition. This is kind of like one he had to do. It's squared away with now. Let's see what he can do against a guy who actually, might be able to take him down or something like that.
Absolutely. The real thing with Neil Magny is that he's such a smothering fighter, but he's very slow and pretty old, and he just doesn't have the snap on his shots anymore. But I'm thinking it's 2 years ago now, he was able to smother and win against Jeff Neal. Just last year, he did that to Mike Below, who just won a couple weeks ago. So he's not completely out of it yet. And this was a legitimate test, I think, for Prates, because now we do know he can defend some takedowns. Now, if he ends up at the top of the division, can he stop Gilbert Burns? Could he stop Shavkat if Shavkat was trying to take him down? I don't know. But getting past a Magny shows that he doesn't have this giant hole in his game. And he's got killer hands. And if they could set him up against Jacktel Maddalena, that might be one of the best fights in the UFC right now.
Yeah.
But
and God,
just awesome.
Is so fast, dude. Those strikes. When he knocked him out, honest to God, we were sitting there like, wait, what did he even, like, we kind of missed it. It was a really blink and you miss it moment. It's so many of his strikes are that fast.
Absolutely. And he makes it look easy, like you're right that his strikes are so fast and devastatingly powerful, but he just has like a certain ease with how he moves, with how he stalks his opponent. He wasn't letting Neil Magny off the cage if he could help it. So impressive win. We got another Team Nerd guy fighting next weekend as well. I've been doing a little bit more research on the Team Nerd fighters. If you do go to their webpage, you'll find that they do have at least 2 UFC fighters that are not as impressive as the mainstay guys. But this gym seems to have something going right for them. They've got some killer talent, and we'll see what Prates can do in the future. Our co-main event was strange to watch because it's really hard to find a fighter who's slower than Gerald Meerschaert. But Reinier de Ridder is. He has a really bizarre build. in that his upper body is like enormous and he's like really tall, but then he has these like skinny short legs, and he's a grappler, so you would presumably need like strong legs to take your opponent down, but his takedowns are very mid. Um, I wrote down while watching this fight, De Ritter is too awkward everywhere and so slow, but he won by submission. Eventually he was able to tire out GM3, one of one of the worst UFC fighters. Um, Now, the reason that this was the co-main event, and this was De Ritter's UFC debut, is because he was a two-division champion over in One Fighting Championship. This shows that he's at least above the very bottom of the UFC middleweight division. That's not saying a whole hell of a lot. I think if you put this guy up against anyone with a little bit of speed and power, we're gonna like if his chin is all right, he could chain together a couple of wins. But with how slow he was, he did actually drop Gerald at one point, but it's because he is the easiest guy to hit in this whole middleweight division. Maybe even easier to hit than Barrios. One of the most awkward, bizarre fights to watch. 3 rounds, both of these guys staying at under 70 strikes thrown. The takedowns, right? Like getting 5 of 13. That is being relentless, but also being very ineffective.
This fight was kind of just like a complete mess. Mearshart, he really earns his last name, Shart, because he's kind of a shart a little bit. He's not very good. He's slow. He's old. He's been at it for a while. It really feels like De Ritter coming in from having a different championship should have maybe had a little bit better of a showing. And I mean, yeah, like he won, but it's just such like a confusing win to even get. He was probably winning, I think, regardless. Like maybe he loses round 2, but like I don't know, man, what the fuck was going on here?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't wait to see when they match him up against the power puncher in his next fight, and he immediately gets knocked
and his
out.
Head explodes,
pretty much,
like in Scanners.
Scanners reference.
We're making references now on this podcast.
Oh dear. Before that, we had Gaston Bolognius versus Cortavius Romeus. I think it's Bolanos, not Bolognius, but
no, it's Bolognius. But yeah, I don't know where you got that from.
Gaston is really good. He has a good chin. He has crazy accurate strikes. Some of his body kicks in this fight were just loud and mean and very clearly hurting Cortavius. He also had some really accurate hooks at range. Cortavius is like so explosive. The guy has like the athletic potential of a freight train, He was able to take down Gaston, but wasn't able to keep him down, wasn't able to beat him up on the ground, wasn't able to get those submissions. And really, it was just a matter of time before Gaston was back on the feet, winning the fight again. And he wasn't getting the worst of all these grappling exchanges either. He ends up getting 2 of his 2 takedowns. 70% striking accuracy on his significant strikes. 100% accuracy on his takedowns. Cortavius is a guy coming off of, I believe, this most recent season of Dana White's Contender Series. He looked really impressive there. The guy has crazy athletic potential, but Gaston has a lot of athletic gifts himself, but he's just much more of a technical fighter. I was impressed by his performance. I can't wait to see what else he can do. Bantamweight is as deep as the Marianas Trench as far as talent goes, so who knows how far he'll go, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. I don't know. Romeus I was less impressed by what he was doing. I mean, he is, Dana White Contender. It's very, very hit or miss sometimes with that, but this guy's 30. It's not like he hasn't had any time to kind of develop, and he just didn't look very developed in this fight. And part of that, I think, was because Gaston was controlling him pretty well. But, you look at some of these statistics, and it really just feels like he should have been able to pull out a little more. You're getting 2 significant strikes, in round 3. You're on the back foot. You need to kind of tap into that backup energy and come out swinging. He maybe got a little bit tired, struggling really just to get anything going. There was a lot of, potential, I guess, but at some point you got to turn that potential into something. I think Gaston looked really good. He looked really strong, but at the same time, I feel like this might have just been, I don't know, off night for Ramius or something like that. Maybe he'll come back in his second fight and look a lot better, but I was not particularly impressed.
No, very limited. And one last thing to note, I'm always complaining that fighters are not throwing enough body shots. 70% of what Romeus threw was to the head, and he didn't land a lot. If you just mix up your targets, it keeps your opponent guessing, and it becomes easier to hit the head, which is, I know, what you really want to hit. But if you mix up the shots, he doesn't always know what's going where.
Yeah, you got to keep him honest, right? It's like football. You got a great passing game, but you got to do runs sometimes, because if you never run a running play, then they don't ever have to prepare for a running play.
That's right. Now, when you fight Jillian Robertson, you know you're going to have to defend some takedowns. And Luana defended some takedowns. She defended 12 of 17. But when you're shooting 17 takedowns in a 15-minute fight, there's not a lot of time for anything else. Now, really what happened in this fight is that Jillian Robertson extended her win streak through grit. It wasn't a lot of technique being used. It was tenacity on her takedowns. She was fighting for those single legs really, really hard. And, as the stats are showing us, most of those did not pan out, but she would try to turn the corner, try to make her opponent work to keep balance on one leg. And she eventually got Luana down. She did, I believe, get a lot of her strikes on the ground as well. About 38% of them on the ground. On the feet, I would say that Luana looked better. Jillian Robertson has never been all that good on the feet generally, but that's not her game. Smothering performance. One thing I will say, and I got to get this out of the way, they have legalized the famous 12-6 elbow. Now, that means if you take your fist, right, and you put it in the air, and then you try to bring your elbow down to hit someone with that, that is now a legal strike. And Jillian Robertson used that strike to hit Luana directly in the asshole.
Is that
and
Jillian,
there it is here.
the anal annihilator Robertson?
And there it is right there.
Is that
wow,
Jillian, the booty blaster Robinson?
Devastating ground.
Is that Jillian, the rectum rectifier? That doesn't work. And whatever. Cut it. Cut it out.
Moving down. We had this one wasn't all that interesting. Mansour Abdul Malik versus Dusko Todorovic. I'm just gonna real quick show you guys. Todorovic knocked out this fight, knocked out by Christian Leroy Duncan. He picked up a win over Jordan Wright, but before that he was getting knocked out by Chidian Chikani. It's just, if you look, this guy's entire UFC career is trading wins and losses on KOs, and he's got twice as many losses as he does wins at this point. I'm not surprised that Mansour knocked him out. He tagged him with a killer knee, and from there it was pretty much done. Dusko landed 3 of 5 strikes.
Yeah, you kind of need Dusko's in there. He's got like a weird head shape too. You notice that? But he's a guy who goes in there to get knocked out, and you need him. You need him for your special boys like Abdul Malik, who are going to come in and get their first win. And everyone's going to be really impressed to talk about how he's such a prospect. Because then Abdul can, make a little bit of money, right? That's what it's all about. And then Todorovic gets to, make money too for getting his head kicked in repeatedly.
We'll see if he remembers how to spell his last name when signing.
Look, his kids will inherit it, and hopefully they'll, become fucking, I don't know,
something
janitors.
Better than he did.
Yeah, anything else.
Jeez. And before that, we had the old lady, Karolina Kovacevic versus Denisa Gomes. Gomes was the better athlete. She's younger, she's faster, she's more powerful. Karolina had like a really impressive performance with where she is in her career and at her age. It's been forever since she challenged for the belt. She lost that title challenge, went on to take a couple of really tough losses. Gomes is on the way up. She has a lot of athletic potential. She actually has some punching power, which is always rare in WMMA, so you like to see it. But if Karolina is able to march forward with punching combinations and you just don't really have an answer when you're not allowed to play at your pace, it's a little worrying. Gomes really clearly won this fight, won every round. They made it close in round number 5, but that's about as close as it got. I would want to see a lot more from Gomes in the future. I would want to see her being able to like stop girls in their tracks. If your selling point is your punching power, have some counter punches ready. Have some counter punches ready for when she comes back, because you can't assume that she's always going to back off just because you have, these giant shoulders. Yeah, those are my thoughts on the fight. Gomes just has to clean that up a little bit. She has to be able to force other girls back if she's going to be relying on that punching power.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think that these two were 15 years apart. Carolina 39, Gomez is 24. 24, she's got time to work. I think that there is going to be room for development there. She looked pretty good in this fight, but it's one of those, she's one of those WMA fighters. She's pretty young and she's doing pretty good thus far. Has not completely collapsed into just winning one and then losing one. And I do think that she's got some potential, but yeah, there's some things that need to be worked on. I feel like this was a relatively easy one. They kind of just sauced her. Carolina kind of on that tail end of getting out of this career. So not super shocking, but it was a good showing.
Yep. Before that, we had, last weekend we had a lot of first round finishes, and the week before in Edmonton we had like 2 or 3 finishes. Just, remember, sharing is caring. Spread it around. We don't need all the first round finishes on the undercard of this UFC Vegas event. This was just another first round KO. He caught Scroggins on the feet. He finished it on the ground pretty quickly. Eliso Dos Santos is a very strong puncher, a very strong grappler. He's a little undersized for welterweights, but if he can catch you, you're in trouble. And that's what happened to Zachary Scroggin. Was this his UFC debut?
Yeah, this was debut for Scroggin.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And this is like another very tall, lanky dude coming in at 170. It's interesting because a guy who's 6'3" with a 74-inch reach, I could see having more success at lightweight than welterweight, and also more success at middleweight than welterweight. It's just a very weird division right now. And the tall, lanky guys don't seem to do as well here. But those are my thoughts on this fight. Scroggin didn't have enough time to get anything going.
Yeah, you got a minute and 50 seconds to talk about here. There's not too much to say. I mean, Dos Santos won. Scroggin, yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's kind of the path. Drop some weight maybe and go down. Because, yeah, looking a little lanky for this division.
Ain't that the truth? Before that, we had Charles Radke versus Matthew Semmelsberger. I was surprised by how quickly he dealt with Semmelsberger. I do have to note that I thought it was a little bit of an early stoppage, and you never know what's going to happen, how quickly a guy is going to recover. Think about Robert Whittaker versus Yoel Romero. How did he take any of those punches and not get finished? Or how did he get hurt the way that he did and recover the way that he did? Sometimes it just happens weird. And so it really sucks when the referee jumps in a little bit early, because Semmelsberger was jumping right back to his feet when they stopped it. Radke had caught him with a couple mean hooks. And, I'm sure he was getting ready to try to close the show. But I've seen Semmelsberger. I'm pretty sure he has a win over like Chaos Williams. Like, he does pretty good in these firefights against power punchers. So that's really disappointing to me. Radke was talking a big game on the mic, even though his last fight was a KO loss to Carlos Prates. And then Prates picked up another KO win before Radke fought again. So I don't like Charles Radke based off of that alone. But
dude's on the prelims, he's just talking a big game. I think every UFC fighter, to some extent, you got to pick your persona, and that guy's going to be like the kind of like tedious braggart asshole in a desperate hope to like maybe get on a main card someday. Or main event, I mean. So yeah, not too much to say here. I do kind of agree on the early stoppage a little bit. I think Semmelsberger should have been given a little bit more of a chance. I honestly don't really expect that he would have done anything with it, but even if a guy's just going to get knocked out, if he's actually going to make an effort to keep fighting, you should just let him get knocked out, There's no point in early stoppage, because then it just leads to bitching. We're sitting here bitching about it. We wouldn't have if you just let Radke finish the job. And if he couldn't have finished the job, then even better, right? You got to kind of give the fighters that opportunity. But at this point, this conversation's been had 10,000 times. So not much more to add to that. I will say that this is Semmelsberger's now 4th loss in a row, which sucks. So hopefully he can kind of bounce back a little bit. He doesn't seem like he's that bad, generally speaking, at least in a prelim sense. So we'll see.
Moving down the card to Damon Blackshear versus Cody Stamann. This is another first round finish. This one lasted at least until the end of round number 1. The monster really looked just way too big for Cody Stamann. Cody started out strong. He was using very fast, very powerful punching combinations. He was catching Damon Blackshear, but just really seemed to not matter. As soon as Blackshear, because he was trying to land this knee the entire time, Cody wasn't able to take him down. He shot for one takedown, didn't get it. Blackshear threw this knee up against the fence. He catches him, a couple follow-up shots, gets him to the ground, locks up the choke. It's over. Stamann is just so outsized, even for bantamweight. He's just too small. He doesn't have good reach. He doesn't have some engine that lets him run like he's Marab. And he's getting a little bit old. It's tough, but I think Stamann's on his way out. Damon Blackshear, not doing anything all that impressive. He had just clear physical advantages over his opponent, and he landed that knee and locked up the sub to close the show when it was ready.
Yeah, I think this was just a case of a little too old, a little too tired. Stamann not looking horrible by any means, but when he got him down on the ground, it was just sub attempts until it was done. Just keep trying until you get it, and it didn't take that much longer.
Nope. Before that, we had Tresean Gore versus Antonio Tricoli. I watched the season of The Ultimate Fighter that Tresean Gore was on. He was talking about being a 2-division champ, that he was destined for greatness, and he ran into a lot of roadblocks. He seems to have tempered that arrogance. He's a little bit more humble now, and clearly he's been putting in work. Antonio Tricoli is not good. He was brought into the UFC as like a last-minute guy for Shara Bullet to fight back in Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia, one of those places. He lost that fight really easily. But he came in last minute, so he gets another UFC fight in against Tresean Gore. Tricoli shooting for a takedown, working for it up against the fence. As soon as Gore snaps up that guillotine, he is leaning back so hard on this choke while standing. Tricoli, the taller man, is almost being lifted off the ground. Crazy tight sub from standing as well, snapping it up around number 1. Really impressive. Nice win for Mr. Vicious. The guy clearly is very strong, pretty fast. He has trouble at range, and he has trouble dealing with guys who don't give him breaks. That's something that we see a lot with some of these really explosive fighters, is that if they don't get their chances to take a breath, you can really overwhelm them. But again, I'm talking longer than this fight went.
Yeah, well, the thing about this one, I do like that Gore, he comes to UFC, gets a couple losses, and then he's taken a couple of years off since his kind of initial run. 2022, he gets a win in his last one. It's been a couple of years now, and he comes back in and he looks really good. Good submission. I think that he's probably had some good time to develop, if I had to guess. I mean, he looks better than I remember him looking, especially in his debut. So that's good. Yeah, Tricoli's not exactly a super impressive guy to beat, but whatever. Sometimes you need that feed. You gotta get in that W column, and that's what's important.
Yep. And the first fight of the evening, Melissa Mullins versus Claudia Segula. This fight was over. Round number 2. Mullins flattened out Segula and just punched her in the head until the ref technically had to stop it because she was not intelligently defending herself. That counts as a TKO. It's not really a TKO because Segula wasn't really in any danger, but if she can't do anything and you just keep punching her in the head, the ref technically has to stop it.
That's why you gotta get your hands up. When they say you gotta get your hands up, that's what they're talking about.
Gotta intelligently defend yourself, and she wasn't doing that.
Gotta get your hands up. Don't give them your back. What other things are said? What other phrases?
Well, she was already flattened out on her back, so she was not following your
Yeah,
Your
no,
words of
I'm just
wisdom.
collecting, like, what do we, what can we say to her? I mean, there's really not much more to say, to be honest with you. Yeah, you have to kind of defend yourself, or else the ref has to stop it.
Yep, absolutely.
I don't know if she
Uh,
knew that rule.
well, she does now.
Yeah.
Now, next weekend,
Whoa, what's going on
I
next weekend? Who's this
I
guy?
can't believe this fight is actually going to be taking place. John Bones Jones versus Stipe Miocic. This fight, when it actually happens, and I see these two guys walk out, everything that I'm about to say will not matter. I won't be salty. I'll probably just be excited and like anxious. But if this fight wasn't for the heavyweight championship, there would be nothing wrong with it. No one would have an issue. It could still headline this card for 5 rounds and no one would care. You could invent a legacy baddest man on the planet belt that either of these guys gets to retire with. The problem is John Jones is on paper the heavyweight champion of the UFC, but he's not really in that division. He's fought one heavyweight in Cyril Gahn, who was coming off a loss, also like to Francis Ngannou, the guy that John was supposed to fight and deduct. So John gets this win over Cyril Gahn, has not fought since then, and has been waiting for Stipe, who has not fought since he was knocked out by Francis Ngannou in their rematch for the belt. Neither of these guys should be fighting for the heavyweight championship when Tom Aspinall fought for an interim belt and has now defended an interim belt. I have to say all that. That all has to get out of the way before I can even address what's going to happen in this fight.
Did you see? I think John Jones like tweeted some shit or something today that pissed everyone
Yeah.
off.
Well, yeah. So earlier in the weekend, too, he did an interview where he said even if he beats Stipe, he will not fight Tom Aspinall.
Yeah.
So that means after this fight, he has to give up the belt.
Yeah, can I read this tweet out just for the
Yes.
viewers at home? Okay, so this was it was on the 11th. I don't know what time zone this is in. But John Bones Jones says, "I know it's hard for a lot of you guys to grasp, 2 commas for some reason, but based on his resume today, fighting and beating him would change nothing about my legacy. I would literally be in the same position I am now, the GOAT." And this is in response to someone saying, "In all honesty, John, why are you scared of fighting Aspinall?" So that's his opinion. He doesn't even need to fight him. Aspinall's so bad, Francis, he doesn't even need to fight him. What would be the point? He would win so easily.
It's hard sometimes to even relate to how delusional fighters are because these guys live and die by their own ego sometimes. Having that sort of crazy belief in yourself to allow you to walk into a cage and fight in front of, 50,000 people and really believe that's a rational decision. You have to be a little bit crazy to do this sort of thing. Okay, whatever. Note to editor Francis, put the meme up, the iceberg John Jones meme. Have a look at that. Everything on there is true. Anyways, moving on to this fight that's taking place next weekend. John Jones fighting Stipe. Old man Stipe has 2 things going for him that I think could potentially give John a little bit of trouble. The one is that he is a power puncher that is not outsized by John. John still has like 4.5 inches of reach on Stipe, but guys who are this tall have an easier time getting to John than shorter fighters with, like an 80-inch reach. In his fight against Dominic Reyes, the first fight against Gustafsson, taller, lankier fighters have an easier time against John Jones, and specifically punchers do better against John Jones. The second thing is Stipe is actually a wrestler. In his first fight against Francis Ngannou, his wrestling won him that fight. I don't know that Stipe would be able to take down John Jones, but at the very least, he was able to hold DC up against the cage in their third fight. He has positions where he might be able to stay safe. And he's not... Guys at heavyweight are not working for submissions like John Jones usually does, but Stipe's not getting submitted in his fights. That all having been said, you can look at the odds. Stipe is old. John isn't a spring chicken, but he's not old like Stipe is. And he's not coming off of a knockout loss in his last fight. And that Stipe did not look good against Francis Ngannou in his last fight, which is already more than 2 years ago. It's just, you know, I've written the script for the best possible scenario for Stipe. You know, he catches John on the feet,
steps on a landmine on the way to the octagon.
Yeah. It's tough, man. It's tough because you don't want John to win. He's almost certainly going to win. He's going to get his little fairy tale ending to his career.
And he's not going to fight
all
Aspinall.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. That's what I think is just so frustrating. Dana White will pay one day for his crimes. I swear to God. But yeah, I mean, we could just rag on all day about how this fight shouldn't be happening. Like, these are two guys that shouldn't be anywhere even close to this. I still can't believe that Stipe is 42. This is not two guys who are like at the prime of the division and prime of their careers. This is really just like, it's a feed. I talk about feed fights sometimes. Like, you know, when we see Brazilian card and they just feed some guy who isn't that good, or he's kind of old, to some Brazilian fighter, just so that the crowd gets hyped up. That's what they're doing, but it's the main event, and it's for the heavyweight title. And that sucks dick. John Jones is probably going to win.
John Jones is almost certainly going to win. The rest of this card is pretty amazing. It's hard to find a fight that's going to suck all the way down here.
Korean Silva's going to win, by the way. That's mine.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing that one
in. And another fighting nerd watch, Mauricio Ruffy is fighting against James Lontop. Lontop was a kickboxer, so that fight should kick ass as well.
Bo Nickel is going to kill Paul Craig in the ring.
Yeah. Should be an awesome fight card. I hope you don't have to pay to watch it. I know I won't.
I would recommend not.
We'll catch you next time.
See you then. UCF podcast, baby. Let's go, baby.